Hello, pre-calc class. It is Tuesday for me and recording lesson 14.1, which is the start of the statistics unit for us. And the first lesson is working with frequency distribution, and we can have a few different types of graphs that represent frequency distribution, such as line plots, bar graphs, double bar graphs, and then what is a frequency distribution, as well as drawing histograms. These will probably be the most difficult ones out of all of them. So here we go. Frequency distribution is just showing how is the data distributed. So these are called line plots. Here's an example of a line plot. And you can have either symbols, such here as they have the football showing the stacks or the height of the bar. Or you could use X's. Sometimes you'll see these just as X's. Typically, you should have a key that shows what your symbol is representing. So here we can see that one football represents one win. So I can see that the Packers have won the Super Bowl 3 times on this. Line graphs, here's another example of a line graph, one you typically see. This one is tracking the stock of Apple, and looks like back in 2008, we started their stock probably around $150 a share. And January, February of 2011, it was around $350. And I just looked on the internet before recording this, and it just had this headline that Apple stock closes above $600 for the first time, and this was as of March 19th, 2012. So where it was last year at $350, today's price, it's in the I think it was like 607 or 601 is where it closed the other day. So should have invested last year, could have doubled your money almost. Line graphs, here's another example. This is gas prices. We can see back in 2009, March of 2009, $1.90 a gallon. Last year, in March of 2011, we were at $3.49. And now in today's world, we're a little above that even. $3.60, $3.70, $3.70 a gallon. Bar graphs. This is back-to-back bar graphs where you can put two sets of data on one graph basically and show how they relate to each other. So on this one we're looking at median weekly earnings based on the type of education you have, and obviously here if you have a college degree, your weekly earning in 1997 is around $800 a week, and in 1980 it was around $425. Data coming off of this chart and putting it into graphic form. So back to back, they will share, the labels or the categories of these bars. So I'd like us to make one of these back-to-backs. Well, this one will compare women's earnings to men's, and this is women's median weekly earnings as a percent of men's earnings. So definitely you want to include a title. You can write in your title, women's earnings compared to men. You always should label your horizontal axis. I did the right-hand side. Why don't you take and do the left-hand side? Notice how I'm going to work my way to the left, getting larger as I move left, so that way they start from the inside and work outward. So label up your axis. And then the bars, we're going to use the bars to compare two sets of data. Now, for my first level, maybe I'll put the 45 to 54-year-olds on that bottom level. So in 1979, well, I think I'll make my left side the 1979 side and the right side my 2008 side. And then I'm gonna, so in 2008 it was 75. And I'll shade in my bar. And in 1979 it was 57%, shading in 57%. Then I could go to the next category, 35 to 44 years, and 75% once again. And in 1979, women were making 58%, slightly more than the year before, or that of the category of the people before us. And you could go ahead and finish off this, but that's a back-to-back graph where you get, bar on the left, bar on the right, easy to compare. Frequency distribution. This is good when there's a lot of data to display, and you can't possibly display every piece of data, so we kind of categorize it or group it. So what we see here is a frequency distribution. It's a table that shows how often or how frequent a category occurs. So a winning score of 10 to 20, I believe this is Super Bowl winning scores for the first 34 Super Bowls. So a winning score between 10 and 20 points occurred 4 times. And I could see a winning score that happened between 50 and 60 points happened only twice. So I'm going to take and kind of tally up my data, get the frequency, and then that's going to lead me into a bar graph. And so we can see from 10 to 20 points, the height of my bar graph was 4. And so on down the line, 4, height of 12, height of 13, and so on. This bar graph, when we come to the bar graph, is called a histogram. And there's one other category of graph that may happen, and it's called a frequency polygon. And that is a line graph that's going to connect the midpoint of each of these bars, the middle of the category. So if I'm between 30 and 40, the middle would be 35. So it's going to connect the midpoint of that interval at the height that it occurred. So midpoint was 35, height was 13, so I get this point up there at 13. So that's called a frequency polygon. Let's make, let's do some definitions of frequency distribution. Good when there's a lot of data. Data is broken into classes. Each class is the same length. They're called intervals. So when we create our categories or our intervals, we want to make sure they all have the same length, whether that be over a length of 5 or 10 years or 10 points like that previous example. And then we're going to display our results in a histogram, which is really simply a bar graph, with the widths of the bar graph having being equal to your intervals. Here's some definitions. You know what range is, difference between the high and the low, class intervals, the range of each class. Usually you try to have between 6 and 8 intervals that you're going to organize your data into when you do your tallying. Class limits, the upper and lower limit of each class. The class mark is that midpoint. When we saw that frequency polygon, that line plot that was connecting, it was connecting the midpoints. And then the frequency polygon is that line graph that's working. This polygon, pretty much works off the class marks. So you might want to hit pause so you can fill in all that information. I'm going to go on. So I have some data here from season 8, the contestants' weight when they were on The Biggest Loser. So this was their beginning weights. And we're going to use that data to take us into a frequency distribution first and then into a histogram. So first thing I want to do is create equal intervals. But in order to do that, I need to know kind of what the range of my data is. So I'm going to look for the lowest data point, which I think might be this 209. So my low is 209 pounds. And let's take it up to the highest amount, which is maybe 407, 430. Oops, how about 476 being the highest? So I've got a span from 200 pounds up to basically, 480 or 500 pounds. And I want to do this in about 6 to 8 intervals. So I figure I have 300, maybe I'll go by 50s then. So I'm going to go 200 to 250 pounds, 250 pounds to 300, 350, whoops, 300 to 350, 350 to 400, 400 to 450, and then my final category or interval that I need will be 450 up to 500. I ended up with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different intervals. So I'm kind of hitting in this 6 to 8 intervals. I need a title on this, so contestants wait. Season 8, I suppose. And we are going to tally our results. So I have 250 falling in this category. Now, how did I decide to put it in this interval rather than this one? The ending number does not get included into the interval. So that's going to force it to go down into that next category. 430 hits right here. 250, again, 355 here, 367, 407, 253, 279, and why don't you take off from there and okay, so back to it. Let's just finish these up. You should have your tallies in. It occurred 3 times, 5 times, 2, 2, 3, and 1. That completes our frequency table, our frequency distribution. Now we're going to take and turn that into a histogram. Once again, you'd want to put your title up here. And then I'm going to put the height, and it looks like the most that occurs is 5 times, so I can go by ones. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This would be our frequency, how often the category occurred. And then I need to put my categories down here. 200 to 250, 250 to 300, 300 to 350, and so on. Label those out. This would be weight, and it's in pounds. Get your labels right. And now it's just a matter of making the height of the bar correspond. So from 200 to 250, it occurred 3. Shade that in. From 250 to 300, it occurred 5 times. So my bar will go up there. That's there. 300 to 350 occurred twice. My bar should be a little bit more equal, but we're just kind of sketching here anyway. And then 350 to 400 also had occurrence of twice. 400 to 450 occurred 3 times, and 1 in that category, 450 to 500. And then just take and shade in your graphs, and it's all completed. Homework will be this, and we can work on that during class time.